Hello and a very warm welcome to the late-breaking F1 podcast presented by Sam Sage and me, Ben Hocking, reviewing today the Azerbaijan Grand Prix from Baku. And oh boy, did it come with a little bit of spice, Sam.
Oh, Baku giveth and Baku taketh away, and Baku gaveth an absolute banger of a Grand Prix. This is the worry with Baku. We've had it before. Sometimes it's been a snooze fest. You never really know. But it was a slow burner, and then it turned into an absolute bonfire at the end of that Grand Prix. What a race. What a battle. Drama with the crash. Verstappen, Norris battling out over what felt like sixth place. Good Lord, we've got so much to discuss. The rookies as well. Honestly, this is going to be an action-packed episode.
Yeah, let's waste no time because, as you say, there is a lot to get through today. Moment of the race submissions, driver of the day, worst driver of the day. As you say, the rookies, Colapinto and Bearman, both scoring points. Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris trying to get back through the field. But of course, let's start out front because for the second half of this race, it was a 3-car, which then came a 4-car battle for the lead. Now, we will get to the crash that ended the race for 2 of those 4 very shortly, but let's start with Oscar Piastri and Charles Leclerc. You can call them the 2 main protagonists in this Grand Prix because Charles Leclerc led the first part of this Grand Prix, starting from pole. Second half of this race, hard tyres. Oscar Piastri manages to make a move on Charles Leclerc into turn 1. Kept it very close throughout the rest of that race, but Oscar Piastri getting away from Charles Leclerc in the last few laps with Leclerc struggling on his tyres. Piastri winning by what would have been a few seconds, but of course VSC making an appearance at the end. What did you make of Oscar Piastri's overtake and how he managed that Grand Prix?
It felt like only a few races ago, Oscar Piastri was, again, even coming up to this race, he was the supportive role. He was the guy that was there to assist Lando Norris. He was a star for the future, it felt like. Even at the start of this season, we were claiming how he's not quite there yet. He's going to be great, but, he's going to give him another season. That leading role has been gifted to him already. He is already on the scene. He's already a star of Formula One. He is here. He is a protagonist. He is someone we should be cheering on. And a Leclerc-Piastri battle maybe could be the kind of battle that we are going to see for many a season to come if these two teams can keep up that fight moving forward. What a drive from Oscar Piastri. Right from the get-go, he was competitive. Keeps it up there up front with Leclerc, gets away well off the start, and he slowly eases those tyres in. And it felt like at one point, before the pit stop strategy came into play, we saw the old issues come back to plague Piastri. Tyre wear built up. Couldn't keep the mediums on spec as much as we expected. We heard the radio come over to Lando Norris where he said the other car struggling on rears. The mediums are falling away faster. But the moment they switched onto those hard tyres, boy, did they suit Piastri in the way he drove. He was able to pull straight back up to the back of Leclerc. The gap closed down super fast. And Leclerc, almost an unusual, uncharacteristic mistake, I feel like, from Leclerc, where he left the door open for Piastri. I mean, you heard it in the cool-down room afterwards. I just don't think Leclerc expected Oscar Piastri to lift off the brakes and come through the gap there because he was quite far back. But it was calm. It was aggressive to the right level, gets the move done. And from then on, the defensive maneuvers from Piastri and Leclerc before that, I must give credit too, they both delivered such an aggressive but clean Grand Prix. They really held themselves to such a high regard, and we got such a phenomenal battle for the race lead. I loved every single lap of it. They didn't let the excitement go. Piastri really was phenomenal today. I was so impressed.
And it didn't start massively well. Obviously, he started in second place. I think it's a short run down to turn 1 at Baku. I think if it's a longer run, I think Perez gets in for P2 because Sergio Perez did get a very good start in this Grand Prix, which was obviously good to get him up to third. I think it maybe would have become second if it was a slightly longer run. That first stint was okay. Like he does fine. Early on, it's pretty good. Like he keeps touch with Charles Leclerc quite impressively, but as you say, he cooks his tyres, and that second half of the first stint, he was really falling off, and I figured that P2 at that point was probably going to be Charles Leclerc's ceiling for the day. No, it wasn't. Obviously, they move on to the hard tyres, and he does a far better job. In terms of the overtake, this happened about lap 20 or so into this Grand Prix. I can sit here and say, Charles Leclerc, you're a fool for not defending. but I would also be calling myself a fool because I didn't think he was going to make that move.
Were you taken by surprise for that move?
Watching along, he was about 7 tenths or so back, and I was like, no, he's going to run out. He's not going to get there. Not quite. I thought he was going to get right onto the back of him, but I didn't think he'd quite have enough to make that overtake. And then, of course, he did. And maybe Charles Leclerc should be expecting an overtake more than I should be expecting an overtake, given he's the one driving the car. But I was shocked that he attempted the move, let alone made that stick. That was phenomenal. What a brilliant overtake that was, because it would have been so easy for him to have overdone that. And he didn't. Like, he nailed it absolutely perfectly. And I think the other thing as well is that with overtaking at Azerbaijan, with that very long DRS stretch, I think once you have like one attempt, let's say Piastri failed and he didn't get by, Charles Leclerc then knows automatically, like he can be told by his team, the exact delta between the two spots where he becomes in danger. So that's 7 tenths or so. Leclerc knows from that point on, if Piastri is 7 tenths behind, he has a shot. And he can play it, right? He can work out how to defend based on that. But first time around, you have that element of surprise. So I do feel like Piastri's attempt was a bit of a, if not now, maybe he would have got another shot, who knows? But I think it was quite crucial for him to get by when he did, because he wouldn't have had that element of surprise again.
Yeah, question for you then, based on that. We saw during the strategy phase of the one stop that they put together that Leclerc stayed out longer than Piastri. Of course, we know that his tyres fell away from him. Leclerc had that kind of almost 8-second gap to Sainz at that point, where he was able to kind of, Perez stopped, Piastri stopped, they had to cover off. Norris, we saw, backed Perez up to make sure that Piastri could get in and out in time. And Leclerc stayed out a little bit longer and had fresher tyres right at the end of the Grand Prix, which is surprising that saw them struggle so much. Do you think that they should have stopped the same lap as Piastri and actually just maintained that gap? Or do you think the undercut that they got because of that was actually the downfall of Leclerc going on to win the race? Or do you think Piastri on the hard tyres had enough pace to jump him anyway?
I think Ferrari played it right. I think they brought him in on the correct lap. Of course, Leclerc building that advantage did give him the space to go a couple of laps longer, and it didn't work out this way, but in theory, him having a couple of laps fresher tyres might have been the difference at the end. It is odd that it went the other way, given the last race, we were talking about Charles Leclerc's brilliant tyre management, and today it's almost let him down compared to his rivals. He was early on in the stint questioning, how is everyone else pushing this much? Surely their tyres are going to go off, and maybe he was goaded into defending more than he was capable, or his car was capable of. So I think Ferrari played the strategy game correct. I think if they had left it any longer, they were at threat of Piastri getting by. So I think they came in on the right lap. I actually think McLaren's strategy was wrong. It didn't cost them. I thought that Piastri should have come in the lap before he did. And I know there was Lando Norris holding, I'm talking more Piastri back to Perez now.
Yeah.
But I know Lando Norris did some work in the middle sector on the second lap that Piastri did longer.
Cost him about a second, I think.
Yeah. But in theory, they could have just stopped him the lap before. Like, as soon as Perez came in on, I've got this at lap 13, it should have been Piastri just coming in on lap 14, in my opinion. And they left it one lap longer, did this whole holding up thing, which worked. But it was
pure luck, pure chance that Norris was in the right place at the right time to hold him up. Because a normal Grand Prix, Norris is up there fighting at the front anyway and wouldn't be an instrument in that battle. And they would have been passed by Perez.
Yeah, I just don't understand, because if they'd just put him on lap 14, then the fresher tyres that Piastri would have had for one extra lap would have equaled probably the same delta that Norris was holding him up by. It just seemed like an unnecessary risk. But in terms of Leclerc versus Piastri, I think Ferrari, I can't question what Ferrari did. I thought it was fine.
I think Ferrari called it a little too close, I think Ferrari maybe should have gone the lap before. I think they got lucky that Albon, who was running that hard tyre for so long, was almost sandwiched between himself and the Piastri-Perez battle. It allowed him, through that middle sector on colder, hard tyres, to build out the gap from what was mere tenths to 1.7 seconds as they come onto through turn 16 onto the start-finish straight, which meant that no DRS was active between himself and Piastri, and rather Albon was having to kind of face the brunt of that attack from the cars behind. I think if they had done that and Albon hadn't been there, I think Leclerc could possibly have been glued to the front, essentially, of Piastri and Perez, and then attacked with no DRS for safety as they came around the next lap. I think if they stopped the lap before, he's able to get away with a second or so and then push on away without any problems. They haven't got to use or hope for someone like Albon to be the intervening factor.
The other two cars that became part of this fight were Sergio Perez and then later on Carlos Sainz. We'll do this backwards. We'll look at the incident that ended their race and then have a look at what actually happened before that to get them into the spot. The crash itself, it has proven to be relatively divisive, I'm going to call it.
Difficult.
Yeah.
Difficult.
There are plenty of people who are adamantly saying it's Perez's fault. There are people adamantly saying it's Sainz's fault, and it is being investigated at the moment. We don't know what the results of that investigation are. How did you see it?
Yeah, we were discussing this, weren't we, before we came on air, because we were both still a little bit unsure of what was going on. Let's go from both drivers' point of view here, one at a time. Carlos Sainz is able to nip in front of Sergio Perez because Leclerc did a pretty robust job at getting back in front of Perez going into turn one. And I think that move was perfectly fair. I've seen a few people critiquing that move. I thought the Leclerc re-overtake of Perez was strong, but I think it was perfectly within the rules of Formula One. I have no issue there. And Sainz, being very optimistic, gets in front of Perez and then goes for a little sniff on Leclerc. And I actually think that might be where the downfall of this incident comes in. I think Sainz got greedy, trying to make a little move on Leclerc, maybe trying to take advantage of that secondary move there. So they come out of the corner, and because Sainz has tried to get the move down on Leclerc, he's actually off of his line. He runs onto the dirty part of the track outside the far right of the exit of turn two. And it compromises his exit, allowing Perez to get up close and personal again with Sainz. Now, then something we were discussing before the show is that the corner exit is wider than the actual racetrack is for the rest of that straight. It kind of narrows up about 100 meters down the road. And I think Sainz is working with that. I think Sainz is prepared for that. And so therefore the trajectory of his exit out of turn two is not essentially a 90-degree exit. I wouldn't be surprised if he's on kind of like an 88-degree exit, which means that actually he's always ever so slightly coming over to the left. You look at the onboard of Sainz as well. Steering wheel is not moving left or right. He's going in a straight line and he looks very confused why the accident has happened. So from a Sainz-only POV, completely closed off, I can't blame Sainz there. Perez, on the other hand, tries to get the overtake done, tries to get right up alongside Sainz. He's not right up alongside him. He's got his front wing and front right tyre just in line with Sainz's rear left tyre. He's squeezing Sainz as close as possible. There's a lot of empty room on the left-hand side, but if you go on board with Perez, the steering wheel is also not moving. So for me, it feels like a 100% racing incident. Sainz is trying to compromise for the wall change. Perez hasn't put that into perspective. Perez is the attacking driver, ends up being the one that technically collects Sainz, but I don't think he really does. I think no one is properly at fault here. I think this is clumsy. I think it's a silly, silly throwaway crash where both of them can have walked away with either a podium or a great amount of points. This would have been Perez's best result for nearly 10 races now. This really would have been a fantastic result for him. And Sainz doesn't need this. Sainz is falling further and further away from his teammate with every Grand Prix that passes by. This is clumsy. It's silly. I do think it's a racing incident. Neither of them needed this. I think Sainz should have been a bit more aware that there was a car on his inside. I think Perez should have been aware not to squeeze him so much and how the track evolves moving down that straight. Silly, clumsy, pointless crash that neither of them needed.
I'll tell you who's happy. Andrea Stella. That is a pretty influential crash for the Constructors' Championship because you've got essentially 15 points going away from one of those two drivers, and then 12 points going away from the other rival in the Constructors' Championship. Lando Norris picks up 2 spots. Piastri's able to hold off Leclerc. Like, that race could have gone very differently for McLaren. Instead, it's helped them. At least I've got it a 20-point advantage between McLaren and Red Bull now, and Ferrari another. They're 51, I think, behind McLaren. So
it's really swung in their favour today, isn't it? They take the lead for the first time in a decade. Yeah,
and that could have gone so differently if that crash doesn't happen. So I think McLaren will be very happy that it did. The incident itself, the Leclerc re-overtake, it's one of those where Sergio Perez very rightfully decides to get out of it because
steps out the way.
Yeah. If he chooses not to, I think that's on Leclerc, because he would have not left Perez the room on the outside. Leclerc had to use every inch of that racetrack to stay ahead. And Perez basically had a choice to say either back out of it or we crash. And if they had crashed, I'd have put that blame on Charles Leclerc. In terms of the incident between Sainz and Perez, I'm going to call it a racing incident. I don't think Perez is to blame at all. I think Perez just is going straight ahead. I didn't see any change in the steering wheel from his side. I do think Sainz is ever so slightly veering to the left. You are right that the track does close up later down that straight. I think the question that the stewards will ask is, did that need to happen immediately, or could that have happened later on down that straight? I'm honestly unsure of the answer. My general philosophy when it comes to these incidents and trying to assign blame or not assign blame is, if I have to look at an overhead shot 50 times and I have to look at an onboard from both drivers 50 times and I'm still not quite sure, it's a racing incident. Like, if you have to go to those depths to try and assign blame, just fine, racing incident. And I've seen a lot of people are very adamantly saying this is Perez's fault. I've seen a lot of people adamantly saying it's Sainz's fault. The way I see it, it was a clumsy racing incident.
They both paid the price, haven't they? Neither of them get points. Neither of them walk away with any advantage. The penalty is you both take each other out of the race.
Highly frustrating for both drivers because Sergio Perez has struggled for a long time this season. He was on merit very much in that fight for the win.
I agree. I think this is Perez's best performance this year. I think I could go as far as to say he outclassed Max Verstappen, not something that comes out your mouth often. He was head and shoulders above the best Red Bull driver for the whole weekend. He was on the pace of Leclerc and Piastri pretty much the entire Grand Prix in a car that I would argue is slower than the two of them. I think he was doing a good job at managing his tyres. He was fully in that fight. It's just a shame that it comes to such blows, because a podium here would really help Perez, I think, in the conversation at the end of the season of, hey, I picked up that podium when Max Verstappen was languishing all the way down in 6th, 7th place. I can still do this. I can still be a driver to fight for you. He hasn't got that on his record anymore. They'll still have the data, but the records don't say it. So it's a real shame for Perez, because he deserves a really big plaudit for this weekend. He really was very good.
He was brilliant, and he was in that fight on merit, and I know Piastri and Leclerc were almost slowing each other up, but Perez got his way back into that fight, and he was on the back of them. And honestly, we spoke about this in qualifying, that Red Bull down a straight line wasn't quite as quick as the other two cars, and if it was, I wouldn't be shocked if Perez goes on to win that race, because he could close up, and he closed up quite a few times to be within half a second or so, but making that clinical move was very difficult for him, because I just don't think on that back straight, on that start-finish straight, excuse me, I don't think he could quite generate the same amount of pace as the other two guys.
I think the telltale signs for that was when the cars had started to pass Albon, and Perez at one point was stuck behind Albon, because the Williams, when it had the DRS of the cars in front and Perez had the DRS on Albon, could just not make any impression on the Williams car. The others eventually got past. They made the time up in the middle sector, and then they were close enough to get the move done. But Perez, for 3 or 4 laps, glued to the back of that Williams, and it ends up being about a 3-second gap by the time he ends up finally getting past the Williams car of Albon. So it just shows you the deficit that Red Bull are running in a straight line, probably to compensate for any kind of downforce that they're trying to extract from the car through that middle sector.
Strategically, I think we were quite close to Red Bull maybe trying a 2-stop here. It was interesting when Albon was still on those hard tyres and Norris was still on those hard tyres, because Albon was holding up Norris and Russell and Verstappen. And it was starting to get to a point where the gap between the top 3 cars and Albon was about 20 seconds, which isn't quite enough to appear ahead after a pit stop. If that gap had extended out just enough, I think Red Bull might have gone for a 2-stop with Perez, seeing that Piastri and Leclerc battling for the win might just wear the tyres out between them, leaving Perez with a chance to attack late on. I think that would have been a good play, but it never quite opened up. Just as it looked like it would, Albon comes into the pits, and Norris actually had such good pace that gap, wasn't there. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And whilst the medium tyres for the starting runners were really not a good tyre, once the fuel had come off and the cars were lighter, you saw how well Norris rang on those medium tyres at the end of the race in comparison to Max Verstappen. He closed up a 20-second gap in under 15 laps, passes him, and of course then Max Verstappen stops and puts the soft tyres on and the crash comes out and everything kind of is held in place. But I think a late run on a medium set for someone like Perez could have closed up, especially maybe on Leclerc, whose tyres we saw completely drop off a cliff. Second place could have been on the cards.
Yeah, the only thing is I think Perez would have had to have gone on to a new set of hard tyres and not medium tyres, because I think the only medium tyres he had available to him were the ones he started on, which was the case for most teams, to be fair. But even so, I think maybe it would have happened. It would have been very interesting to see it play out that way, but never quite came to be. It was a great performance from Perez. And Sainz, I think, does a good job to get back in that fight.
Sainz does a great job. Yeah. I was surprised to see him there. All of a sudden, he appeared. And he was suddenly a part of this leadership battle. He really brought himself back into play. So a great drive from all four. Just a shame that two of them end in the wall.
Okay, after the break, we're going to look a little bit further back. Lando Norris charging through the field. Max Verstappen in the woods. We'll be debating both of them next. Okay, Lando Norris, after starting, was it 15th in the end, wasn't it?
Ends up being 15th, after Gasly back of the grid and Hamilton engine take.
Yes, so qualified 17th, but ends up starting in 15th place. Manages to get all the way back to 4th. Certainly wasn't looking like it was going to be 4th until that late crash, but he'll walk away with 13 points, having also claimed the fastest lap. It's 3 points more than Max Verstappen, who will finish in 5th place. Again, looked like it was going to be a bit worse than that without the crash. So overall, a 3-point gain for Norris in the Drivers' Championship. Who's going to be happier with that?
Oh, Max Verstappen. Despite having the world's angriest day, good Lord, was he grumpy over the radio. Both Red Bull drivers, they were having a good old whinge, weren't they, the pair of them? Not happy at all. But Max Verstappen, after having a day like that, is going to walk out and go, I only lost by 3 points. Yeah, I'll take that. He's not gaining on me enough currently to win the championship. He's not taking it off me. This would have been a perfect day for Lando Norris just to get it right. For him to get himself in the top 3 in qualifying. And then if Piastri could go on to win that race as he did, there's every chance Lando Norris could go and replicate exactly the same thing. And with Papa rules being in full effect, supposedly, then there's every chance that Piastri would have been told to give up that race wing for Lando Norris at that point. And McLaren might have had a 1-2 with Norris taking a full 26 points. And that would have been not just a 3-point gain, but a 16-point gain. And that's enough. That is enough to start clawing in the world title challenge. Max Verstappen having a disastrous Grand Prix, being passed left, right, and centre. George Russell absolutely mugging him off with that car that also didn't look particularly quick. I'm sure he was thinking, oh, this is it. This is where the tide's turning. I really start to struggle. Comes home in a miraculous 5th place and only loses 3 points to his direct rival. It's almost the most perfect, imperfect day out I think you could have for a title challenge.
Yeah, it's really odd to analyse it, because if you're Max Verstappen, you're in a position where your rival has had an awful qualifying, has qualified a long way back from you in 17th, manages to gain 2 positions thanks to other penalties, and he's still beaten you, but it's only by 3 points, which if you'd come into the weekend saying that, it probably would have been a good thing. And McLaren, you could argue, didn't have maybe the outright pace advantage that they've had at the likes of Zandvoort. So it's a very odd one to analyse. I think Verstappen should, given the buffer that he has, be happy with this. But if you'd have given him this result after qualifying yesterday, he'd probably have gone, oh, I would have fancied my chances of beating Lando Norris quite comfortably.
What's happening here is what I mentioned maybe about 10 races ago now. Once we started to see the tide shift, once we kind of around the Spain, Canada area of the season, is the cannibalization of the other teams around Red Bull are going to help Red Bull to at least one of the titles, maybe not the other now, because obviously that has swung. But Ferrari back in the mix, McLaren is still leading the way, Mercedes picking up points left, right, and centre from other teams where they can. It is inadvertently helping Max Verstappen hold on to this lead. Because if it was a straight fight every race where McLaren has now got dominance, Piastri or Norris are the only two that can win. Well, we've got team orders. Norris will go on to win. That title will crumble very quickly. But where you've got Leclerc pushing for wings, Piastri is able to assert dominance. You've got Sainz being incredibly strong these days. Perez having a day like today as well is confusing. It means that Norris is not able to gain the level of points race by race that other title challengers would have done historically. So 5th, 6th places for Verstappen is actually still good enough to hold on to the driver's title overall, which is very bizarre. Because Norris is actually being hindered by the success of other teams not falling away, rather than Red Bull being good, which is a very confusing situation to be in. So Verstappen can come away happy, I think.
Yeah, and an odd one at the end of the race as well, because he's essentially gained 2 positions as a result of this crash, but also lost the opportunity to get the fastest lap that he pit for. So obviously that's only worth 1 point, whereas the 2 positions he gained worth more than that. So it's still a net gain. But yeah, as similar to the discussion we had with Perez, I think just that Red Bull in Sector 3 wasn't competitive enough for them today, because he was stuck. Like, he was where Carlos Sainz and Verstappen were relatively close in the first stint. Sainz was able to get by Albon and just eventually become part of the battle for the lead. Verstappen, on the other hand, is trapped behind Albon, can't get by, and then obviously is then victim to Norris late on. Even with all that, that was poor from Verstappen today. It wasn't.
I was going to ask, because Verstappen and Perez are driving the same car, and the gap between them was unusually large. What do you think is going on for Verstappen that Perez is able to overcome today? Because that is not a usual circumstance for that team.
Well, as we referenced in the preview, this is a very good racetrack for Sergio Perez, and I'm not surprised to see what happened today with how good Perez was, because he's won here twice and he's got podiums here for Force India. Like, he has typically been pretty good at, let's say, all street circuits, but particularly here. So I wasn't shocked at all. I think the gap, like the severe gap between them, again, I think is down to how they were the other side of Alex Albon. I think that massively played into the deficit. But even so, Perez had this comfortably in hand over his teammate. So, yeah, it was a great race for him. I will keep complimenting him for how well he's done today. It doesn't change anything for me long term, because he's always been good here. You know, it's not here that he needs to get better. It's these other traditional race circuits that he needs to get better at. But if we're analysing today's performance in isolation, yeah, he was one of the best out there.
Yeah, agreed. Perez can't be running a career at one of the best teams in Formula One on 2 good races out of every 10. That's just not a form book that you want to be bringing into that kind of team. Verstappen sounds like he had some issues, though. Brakes were fading. Meant that he didn't have the confidence in the braking zones as well. It wasn't a good performance. I think there might have been some mitigating circumstances, but if the brakes were that much of a problem, the team would have brought him in. If that was a safety issue, the team would bring him in. So, yeah, Max, one of his worst of the season, I think. And I don't think he's crumbling under any kind of pressure. I don't think that's Max Verstappen, but I do think that they are being a bit radical with setup and development to try and hold on to this title challenge, and it is costing him how comfortable he is in the car.
Okay, shall we review some bold predictions?
Yeah, well this week, didn't it?
No, not really.
Oh.
Harry, what did Harry say? He said that someone new was going to win this weekend, which, to be fair, not that he predicted it would be Perez, but it was looking like that could be on for the majority of this race, but ultimately that crash between Perez and Sainz put an end to that. Piastri has already won this season. Harry, your bold prediction was wrong.
On that point, is that 5 different multiple race winners this season?
Sure. That's pretty crazy.
What a season we're having. Honestly, what a season.
My bold prediction was that Oscar Piastri was going to refuse some team orders. That was pretty dead in the water on Saturday, because they were nowhere near each other.
You didn't have a chance, did you? You didn't have a chance.
The only team orders that happened were Norris helping Piastri. Which is
literally the opposite thing happened to you.
Yeah, I predicted that there would be team orders and Piastri would refuse them. Instead, there were team orders and Norris accepted them.
Papa rules.
Papa rules.
Mine was good, though.
Yeah, you said that Sauber were going to get points, which they almost DNF their way up the order. They got to 14th, even with 4 DNFs. But
what I was relying on. I was relying on DNFs to come through. Just more of them. 14th for Zhou, who had a better race. I don't know what was going on with Bottas. I don't know if he had a problem that I've just missed. But Zhou wasn't far off the pace today.
Shall we do Driver of the Day?
Yeah, go on then.
The verdict is in. You're the driver of the day. You're the driver of the day. You're good at driving.
Who you got?
Loads of options, genuinely loads of options. I thought, obviously, both Leclerc and Piastri were absolutely sensational. I thought Perez, all right, up until the crash, had an absolutely brilliant Grand Prix. I thought Albon and Colapinto were both brilliant. Alonso somehow sneaks into a 6th place. I thought Bearman did a really, really good job. Honestly, there's so many that I can list, and I love it when it's like this. I am just going to go for the race winner. I am just going to go for Oscar Piastri. I think he held on to tyres that didn't suit the car and maybe learned a lot from them. And then I think he was by far the best driver on those hard tyres for that second stint. So, yeah, Piastri deserves it. Giving it to as well by the public, which is a change. Usually it's Mr. Lando Norris.
Yeah, that's true. And given his progress through the field, like that's a very classic driver of the day vote.
They
as
love
well.
that. They love that.
Yeah. I thought some of the contenders were Alex Albon, Sergio Perez, Pierre Gasly, and Charles Leclerc. Piastri was probably second place for me. Fernando Alonso had no right to finish 6th in this race.
How was he always scampering off down the road from these battles behind him?
No.
He just kept not being involved.
I don't think that car was good enough to beat the Williams. I don't think that car was good enough to beat the Haas. I don't think that car was good enough to beat Lewis Hamilton, which if you add all of those together, I'm not sure Alonso should have got points from this race. So the fact that he's got 8 of them, that's pretty good going. They nailed the strategy. They brought him in quite early. Was able to... He always had, like, Colapinto fairly close to him, but you never felt like it was really in much danger. I think he just managed the race absolutely expertly. I thought he was really good today, Alonso.
Every time that Colapinto got within a second of Alonso, I thought, right, here we go then. It's going to happen now. He's finally caught up to him, and that Aston Martin has got no chance of holding off this Williams in a straight line. So the gap is going to keep closing. I think you look back at that later, it's a second and a half again. And I just don't understand how he kept doing it. He kept running away from the danger. So note to self, if you're ever in danger, do a Fernando Alonso.
Yeah.
Run.
Pretty good going. From good to bad, worst driver of the day.
Get in the bin. Worst driver of the day. Bin. Worst driver of the day. You suck at driving.
Who have you got for worst driver of the day?
A couple of options, I think, out there. I'm going to go with 2 today. I think Lewis Hamilton had an absolute stinker. While I do not think that Mercedes was great, George Russell winds up on the podium. He was fighting alongside the Ferraris and he beats Max Verstappen on pace alone. George Russell had a good race and Hamilton just could not get anything out of that car. We said after the qualifying review, has he set the car up to be really ultra offensive and race trim? He could get near anyone. He kept overheating. He could get up to Bearman multiple times. Barely got past, where the Haas's were. I think it's a really bad Grand Prix from Lewis Hamilton. Really disappointing. But I'm going to give it to Lance Stroll, who quite simply decided to not brake when trying to overtake Yuki Tsunoda and ruin his own Grand Prix and then ruin Yuki Tsunoda's Grand Prix. And there was no investigation about it whatsoever either. So for me, Lance is the worst driver of the day, but Hamilton, that's a stinker from him.
Lance Stroll's move for me was ambitious.
That's a polite way of putting it.
Yeah, that might be the best way of putting it. I do want to see an onboard from Stroll just in case there was more of an opportunity than I thought there was. But even so, lap 1, come on, man. I don't really think there was much need to do that. I think this might be the first time I'm ever saying this in the history of worst driver of the day. It's a toss-up between Verstappen and Hamilton for me.
Crikey, are you sure this is the worst driver bit?
Yeah, this is very odd indeed. I am going to give it to Lewis Hamilton, actually. And if something comes out that there was something incredibly wrong with his car, then so be it. I will apologise. But in terms of the outright performance, yeah, he really struggled with those back marker teams that I didn't think he'd struggle with.
He was behind Gasly for so long.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I expected the exact same recovery from Hamilton that, say, Norris had. I wasn't expecting that. But I did think he would quite comfortably get back to ahead of Alonso and almost the back of that 4-team pack. And he didn't. He scored 2 points, but he shouldn't have, if that makes sense.
Bloody lucky 2 points for Lewis Hamilton, that's for sure.
But yeah, I know he took the penalty, but equally, he wasn't in a great position in qualifying anyway. This was one to forget for him because he was off from really the first moment. Like it just never happened for him.
No, I completely agree with you. Really, really, really disappointing. Hopefully he goes back to a place where he enjoys, Singapore, and we see him bounce back.
And what about Big Brain Strat?
Bob, we're gonna need you to box for wets. What? It's not even raining out. What are you talking about? Yeah, and Bob, if you get a chance, let your teammate pass you. What? He crashed out. He's not even in the race.
Big Brain Strat?
I'm going to use a positive one. And I'm actually going to call in I think, momentary decision to call upon Lando Norris to block Perez, because it turned out to be a terrible strategy from McLaren to leave Piastri out so late. But I think the way that Norris complied and got the job done kept it viable. And I think McLaren and Norris specifically deserve some commendment for the way that they kind of jumped to action and they made sure that their teammate was able to essentially, I think, go on and win that race. So what turned into an awful call was a very clever call by the rest of the team.
I'll go with Alpine just like not doing pit stops. I
can't be bothered.
No, they're just like, go on, out you go, hard tires, we'll wait for the safety car. 3 hours later, no safety car. They eventually obviously did pit, but yeah, they went with the same strategy as Albon and Norris, but then didn't do the pit stop bit, which I kind of understand why, because they were just nowhere anyway. But
Ocon was bad.
Yeah,
Is there something going on with that car that he hasn't got and Gasly has got, because he was off it?
Yeah, I'm not convinced there wasn't something wrong with that car, because it's very rare to see those two drivers so split. And we know that Ocon basically, didn't do first practice, didn't do third practice, ended up in the pit lane after qualifying. Like, everything went wrong for him up until this race, and then it didn't stop going wrong. So, but yeah, I think Daniel Ricciardo did it as well. Just not really pitting until like the last possible moment. Right, that'll do it for Big Brain Strat. We've still got plenty to come on this episode. We're going to take a quick break now, but we've got the midfield to get into right after this. Okay, everyone, welcome back. Should we have a look at Mercedes? We've spoken briefly about Lewis Hamilton's comeback through the field, but of course, George Russell, a far better day for him. An unexpected podium, which might be Russell's new nickname now that Mr. Saturday might have gone away. Yeah. What did you make of it? It did feel like they were certainly a step behind Ferrari and McLaren today, but of course they have still come away with a podium. So is it a good result?
I think Russell will not count his lucky stars. I think he'll come out as a guy who was owed some good fortune. I think Russell has had a bad run of races, and many of them I do not think have been caused by his own doing. And so I think this is kind of swung back his way. We've said this so many times. Formula One is, you take it when you get it, and a lot of the time it can go the wrong way for you. George Russell was owed some good luck, and he got good luck. And this is the second time this season that two people in front of him have come together, and he has found himself in a very fortuitous position. But Russell's race was good. I think Mercedes were the fourth fastest car today. I do think that even with Verstappen's ailments and his poor performance, I do think that the Red Bull was better than them today. And the Ferrari and McLaren were head and shoulders above them. So the fact that he got the move done on Verstappen, the fact that he was fighting in around that Sainz, Verstappen, and then Albon position that ends up coming through was positive. And I think he was very consistent, very quiet in his Grand Prix for the most part, but got the job done, picks up a podium. I think he'll walk away with this frustrated at the car, but positive about himself, which isn't a bad thing because he can only work on one of those. Overall, good weekend for him.
Yeah, and I think the rest of this season for Russell and Mercedes is probably just going to be a case of not making any errors and just seeing if a win or a chance of a win comes about, because it's clear that whilst they did win at Spa and whilst they did win at Silverstone as well, I know he won at Austria, but they certainly weren't the fastest team there. It seems after the summer break that it's a case of we're probably not, or most weeks, going to be the fastest team. But equally, there might be one weekend where everything goes right and we do have that chance, in which case they've just got to be there to take advantage of it, which I think is what Russell will be looking to do for the rest of this season. I don't think that car was good enough to be third today, but he's managed the race well, and I think he got better and better as the race went on. That first stint wasn't particularly great for Mercedes, but they
start for him, wasn't there?
Yeah, and they seem to like the hard tyre a bit more than the medium tyre. So,
shock. Mercedes likes the colder, hard tyre.
Yes.
Which has been the behaviour of their car for about a decade now.
Yeah, most of this season has just been a case of Mercedes weren't really anywhere in the first stint. Then they got a bit better, but it was a bit late, which is kind of the summary of today. I think Russell's done a pretty good job. I thought the overtake on Verstappen was very good, very clinical, no problem with that at all. And yeah, maybe it would have been interesting to see if he'd qualified a position or two better. And again, Alex Albon was the great divider in this race. That's what my new nickname for him, I think, the great divider. Whether he would have been anywhere close to those top 4 cars, my instinct tells me no, but it would have been interesting to see nonetheless.
I think he would have comfortably been sitting in 5th place anyway, behind Sainz, Perez, Piastri and Leclerc. I guess without the crash, I don't think he could have been anywhere close. Or without Albon, rather, I think he could have sat in kind of a 5-10 second gap away from them, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think the very faint chance of getting part of this Constructors' Championship battle that we were maybe talking about just before the summer break when they were looking pretty good, that's now fully faded. Yeah.
They are settled to 4th for the rest of the season.
Which might not be the worst thing in the world because, they're not going to get caught by anyone behind them. And maybe now they can just start to look exclusively at next season. They will, of course, get more wind tunnel time as a result of being 4th rather than 3rd, 2nd and 3rd, so they can use that as well. But yeah, I think that's dead in the wind now. Let's move on to some of the other midfield drivers. We've already mentioned Fernando Alonso somehow finishing in 6th place, but it wasn't a double Aston Martin points finish. It was a double Williams points finish. Alex Albon and Colapinto went on completely different strategies. Albon, of course, starting on the hard tyre, went very long into this race and ended on the mediums. Colapinto was pretty much the first driver to come into the pits on those medium tyres. He only did 10 laps, I think, before switching to the hard tyres. They finished this race 7th and 8th, which is good for 10 points, which I think means they've scored more points from this race than they have the rest of the season combined.
All season. Yep.
What did you make of their race?
Genuinely so impressed by both Albon and Colapinto. The car itself, I don't think was head and shoulders above any of the rest of the midfield. I think the Haas was with them there or thereabouts. I think that the Mercedes probably should have beaten them both, and obviously Hamilton didn't manage to get back through. They are straight line merchants, and they put that to full use today. Colapinto's ability to run long on that second set of hards, the after he pitted rather, was really, really impressive. I know that he's still a rookie, and I know he's been to 2 tracks that massively suit the Williams, but that still doesn't mean that this wasn't a massive challenge. Baku is such a tough place to come in. We've seen drivers far superior to Colapinto in terms of experience make many a mistake around here, and I really do think he earned his stripes today. I was very, very impressed by what he was able to do. Equally, Alex Albon's first stint on that set of hard tyres, holding off the likes of Verstappen, Norris, Sainz, repeatedly. I was blown away by how well he defended, by how well he hung on to that top group. I don't think the Williams had the outright pace to be with them, but because of the straight line speed that he was able to execute, maximizing his exits, holding on to those hard tyres, he delivered a fantastic performance for Williams. So those two coming together just tell you that actually they mirrored each other's strategy. They ran it completely differently, but because Colapinto clearly he's a good driver, he's clearly got something there, and Albon is Alex Albon, they were able to bring home such success for Williams. Someone said to me in the stream, would Logan Sargent been able to have done exactly that? I don't think they hang on to that many points. It did feel like a race where points were very much possible for Williams. I don't think he picks up the same amount that Colapinto does.
And that was essentially what James Vowles made the decision based on, wasn't it? When he made this decision, he very explicitly said, we think with these upgrades, we're going to have a better car to be able to fight for points. And we want 2 drivers that are going to be able to get in those positions. Today was evidence that Colapinto was able to fight in the points where Logan Sargent, let's face it, probably wouldn't have been. Now, I wouldn't have put Sargent in the car to start the year, but, that's a discussion for another day. Yeah, I think they both did a very good job, and I think Williams played it correctly to split the strategies. I think Williams were almost a little bit unlucky in that Alex Albon was, alongside some other drivers as well, waiting to see if a safety car was going to appear or a VSC. It's Baku. They usually do, and they didn't. So I think it's difficult to say you're unlucky because a safety car doesn't appear, but equally, there's such a good chance of one happening at Baku. They played for that strategy and it didn't quite work out.
It's a fair strategy to aim for.
Yes, and it's still a good strategy even if a safety car doesn't come out, as Albon showed. But yeah, maybe a little bit unfortunate they didn't get that break. But yeah, the way he was able to hold off the much quicker cars behind was great. I think he gets a tad unlucky because if he is just a couple attempts faster on his in-lap, or if the pit crew is a couple attempts faster, he gets clear of Nico Hülkenberg straight away, and that slowed him down a little bit because it took him a couple of laps to overtake Hülkenberg, it's a Haas, of course, it was going to be pretty good in a straight line. And yeah, I think maybe, I don't think he'd have got Alonso anyway, but he might have made a bit more of an impression on him if that goes differently.
I think they could have got Alonso. I do think the challenge was there. So many times they were inside of DRS, and I think that showed the difference between Colapinto's growing ability and someone like Albon, where if Albon gets within DRS range of Alonso, I think he might be able to make the difference.
And I appreciate with Colapinto, I know we're talking about vastly different circumstances here in terms of like what you're doing in the race, but we saw Charles Leclerc struggle on hard tyres to end this Grand Prix. They fell off a cliff, right? Colapinto did 6 more laps on those hard tyres than Leclerc did. Fair play to him. Like he kept those tyres alive for the entire stint.
Now, I'm not going to blow the Colapinto being trumpet too hard right now. We've had 2 very straight line focused racetracks. And yes, I think he is being impressive. The real challenge comes next weekend when we go to Singapore. If he's able to, and I don't think points are properly on the cards for Williams in Singapore. I'd be surprised. But if he's able to be right there with Albon the entire weekend, do Williams have a tricky conversation on their hands? The fact they've gone out and signed Sainz and their young driver is actually currently good enough to drive that race car?
I don't think so, just because of how good the incoming driver is. Like, if they had settled for someone worse, then maybe. But I think just because it's Carlos Sainz and it's Alex Albon, like that is, as we've discussed already, such a great lineup. There's not much you can do. Like, they're not going to do anything with Carlos Sainz. I think what probably happens is Colapinto has to sit on the sidelines for a year and see if the likes of Carlos Sainz maybe move. Carlos Sainz gets another opportunity at a top team and then he can walk in. And if not, then maybe he goes elsewhere. But I think he'll at least be content. Well, not content, but he'll be okay enough about sitting on the sidelines for 1 year while seeing what unfolds in the driver market. It can move very quickly.
It can. I would be nervous if I was Colapinto. He's doing a great job. We're only 2 races in, so, he might have an absolute shocker for the next 6. But Liam Lawson had a really, really good stint in that RB team, and he's still yet to have even a secret. We might have an announcement this week, folks. Who knows? It might all change. But Liam Lawson currently still out of a Formula 1 seat, and I would argue is as good as Colapinto has been. If he doesn't get that seat locked down as soon as possible, he might spend the rest of his career firmly sat on the sidelines.
There is at least a notable difference that Liam Lawson was, let's face it, basically promised a seat for next year, and we'll see if that comes to be. I think James Vowles has been pretty upfront about this in that, the lineup's already locked in for next year. This is a complete bonus for Colapinto that he did not know was coming.
Very true. Very true.
That might be one of the reasons why he's been doing such a good job over the last 2 races, is that he has got a sense of freedom in the car.
It's a no-pressure job right now,
It
right?
is.
If he gets it right, well done. That's a great turnout for you. If you get it wrong, oh well, we never expected you to be brilliant anyway.
I'll tell you what, obviously Williams have had a good result today. Haas haven't had a great result. They've only scored 1 point, but equally they were in the fight, and I think they'll be disappointed not to come away with more. But having said that, other races, like they'll probably be in the mix again. They were in the mix at Monza. They were in the mix here. RB got to be a bit worried at this point.
RB are going nowhere.
For both teams, right? They were already worried about Haas. They might need to be a bit worried about Williams now.
Yeah, exactly. If Williams can pick up, if they can have another couple of races where they end up with maybe 6, 8 points, it could quickly flip over for them. The development of the car's going nowhere. Because they always find themselves in the midfield, they are regularly going to become victim of collisions, retirements, punctures. They're never running in complete clean air. Ricciardo he's not back to his best self. Despite having a better stint, he's not there. And Yuki Tsunoda may be coming back into his own, but if he can't get a race finish, then he's not going to be able to score anything anyway. And even if both drivers were in the mix for the whole Grand Prix, I don't think they're scoring a point. I don't think they're coming close to scoring a point. RB are in trouble. Red Bull are at the mercy of the other teams around them. It's not a good time for the Red Bull family right now.
RB have got to be hoping that Daniel Ricciardo had a stinker today. Because if he didn't, and he had a good race, and that's just what the pace of the car was, they got bodied by Gasly. Like,
Yeah,
Gasly
they're worse
and
than Alpine at this point.
Gasly and Ricciardo were on the same strategy, and it wasn't close. That's worrying.
Yeah, I'm nervous for the RB family right now. If they go into 2025 and they can't kick on from here, we might see a top 3 that doesn't show Red Bull, and we might see a bottom 3 that shows RB. It's not looking good.
No, it isn't. From the beginning of this season, talking about top 5 finishes.
Top 5s are coming.
To the end of the season, that could be a fight for 8th place.
It's not looking good for team management. Lauren Meck is probably not having a great time at the moment. There's a lot of money being spent on Ricciardo being there. The whole team feels like it's going in the wrong direction.
Quite possibly. A quick shout also for Ollie Bearman. Managed to
I was impressed.
Point.
I was impressed with him. First driver to was it ever score 2 points for 2 separate teams in your debut season?
Oh, okay. That's an interesting
which is a fun little stat. I'm glad it ended. I know he got it through the crash, but I do think he earned it.
He was there though, wasn't he?
Yeah, there the whole time. He drove well. He fell off the back of Hamilton once Hamilton eventually passed him, but I think he was better than Hulkenberg for much of the entire weekend. Which I think Hulkenberg more had an off race than Bearman was just better, but Bearman was good, and I think a little bit fortunate, but I'm glad he got the point.
I don't know what happened with Hulkenberg late in this race because I thought
he just disappeared.
Well, yeah, I thought Hulkenberg actually had a very good race and was better than Bearman. I know Bearman had the advantage of qualifying better, of course, but we know Hulkenberg got by Bearman. It looked orchestrated, I think.
Bearman moved out the way, yeah.
In either, I think he was getting by, even if that wasn't orchestrated. But, Hulkenberg was having a pretty good race. And then the last sort of 5 laps or so, he disappeared. And I don't know if there's a particular reason for that, or if it was the same sort of thing happened to Hulkenberg that happened to Leclerc, and his tyres just completely died on him. I don't have that information at the moment, so I won't assign too much blame to Hulkenberg just yet.
He did lose seconds.
Yeah, so I don't know if maybe it was a power unit issue. I haven't got a clue, but Bearman himself had a good race. As I said on the preview midweek, if Hulkenberg is in the fight for points, Bearman will want to be the same, and he was. So I think he can go away happy with his result. The thing is, I know as well, he's not going to be over the moon with it. Like no. He'll look at the 2 Williams ahead and go, maybe I could have got them, which is fair enough. But he has had a good race. He'll
the right
just
attitude for
me.
me.
He'll know that there were improvements.
And I think Haas will look at this and go, we got a good one in our hands.
Yeah.
I'm glad we've got a driver here for the next season. And maybe if Ocon does turn up and we get the good Ocon and not the terrorizing Ocon, then they've got a good lineup for next year.
You know, Bearman and Ocon, that's a tasty lineup.
I think for it's not a back marker team because they're not anymore, but for it's a lower midfield team, I think it's a solid pair that they've got.
They'll miss Hulkenberg naturally because he has done such a good job for them over the last couple of years, but that's a pretty good way to replace him.
Yeah, if Bearman really comes into it after the first few races, I think that they're going to be in a really solid place.
Okay, one last break on this episode. On the other side, moment of the race. Okay, everyone, moment of the race coming up on today's last segment. But before we get to Discord submissions, as we always have, we each have our own moment of the race. What have you gone for?
I've just gone for the Piastri Leclerc battle. It's not often that we get literally wheel to wheel, lap after lap battles for a race lead, and they were glued to each other for so long. Capped off, of course, by what I thought was a brilliant, advantageous, really grabbing it by the moment. The scruff of the neck was Piastri getting the move done on Leclerc. They were sensational, brave, clean. It was a brilliant fight. We don't get to see it enough.
I don't think I meant to say this earlier when we discussed it, and I didn't give him enough praise for this, Oscar Piastri, because it was excellent defense. What I was, I think, most impressed by was he didn't over-defend.
No.
He defended as much as he needed to every single time. Like, when it looked like let me rephrase this. If he was a bit less experienced or just a bit worse at defending than what he is, he might have just dove to the inside where he didn't need to a couple of times, because Leclerc was a few attempts back on a few occasions, and he knew exactly when Leclerc was and wasn't going to give it a go. And it would have been very easy for him to have needlessly defended the inside of turn 1 and then get completely out of shape for the next 2 corners and then be overtaken into turn 3. The fact that didn't happen, I think, was the most impressive thing that he did.
He is as cool as a cucumber,
Yeah.
that kid. He just is a sponge. He just soaks up pressure like someone I've not seen for God knows how long.
Pressure? What? Pressure?
What pressure? Pressure's for tires. Obviously, went through my head so many times. He is a star. He's not a star in the making. He's a star.
My moment of the race, I'm going to go less serious. It was Charles Leclerc and his chat over team radio.
Yeah.
Come on. It's great encouragement. Just
Woo!
come on.
Come on, you can do it, Charles. Yeah, I'm trying.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't think about that. Cheers.
Also loved the what do you think of Plan C? Not stupid.
Yeah, that's a good one, that.
Did you do Plan C? Did we ever see Plan C? Who knows?
I reckon Plan C might have been the 2-stop, I think.
I think it was the 2-stop, yeah. And then I think they realised that Perez wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah. Right, we've got moment of the race submissions from our Discord. We've got a lot of submissions today, so if yours isn't played, apologies. We do have to. We can only get through so many, but if you aren't played today, we do have plenty of opportunities for you to get involved. Of course, it's a race next week. We've got the Singapore Grand Prix, so we'll be back with moment of the race next week, and indeed, who's under pressure submissions in our midweek episode. Who have we got today, Sam?
We have got
Bong.
There's the bong, the famous bong. We could get it out.
Well, no, I've referenced it now. I can't really.
The bong might be a Hall of Fame contender for the end of the season.
Fair.
For the Elbies. Coming up first, we've got a great name. It's the Law, son.
It's the Hammer. It's 8 o'clock on the East Coast. So up late watching the UFC, and I'm up early watching F1. It is a brutal day for me. A little bit of a Sunday hangover. But my moment of the race is going to be Lando's engineer telling him to imagine Andres Stella, telling him no wheel spin. Just imagine it while you're driving 200 miles an hour through tight, narrow corners and straights. Keep braking late.
I love that. I love that. Imagine Andreas Scala sat your shoulder. No wheel spin, Lando. Like, great. Yeah, thank you. That's what I need to hear right now.
Some of McLaren's team radio, man. It's just.
What are you on?
Sometimes.
Wind it in. They're doing a good job. Another fantastic name in the Discord coming up next. Mo Bigness.
What's up, LB boys? It's Mo Business coming at you from the States. First time submission. Moment of the race. Listen, Oscar Piastri. Absolute incredible defense. Defense wins championships. For McLaren, that is the case. What a masterclass. Also, sorry, Harry, no Cyber points. Keep breaking late. Love you guys.
Well, I mean, it was mine, Mo Bigness, but equally I am sad.
Love the first time.
We love a first timing. We absolutely love a first timing. Coming up next, we have got another fantastic name. One of our favorites collectively, Mojo Dojo Casa House.
Hola, Light Breakers. Mojo Dojo Casa House here. My moment of the race has to be Oli and Franco on the points today. Great job for the new rookies on their second Grand Prix. Bye, guys. Love the podcast. Keep breaking late.
I think that's a deserved moment of the race. Not often you get essentially 2 rookies like that scraping into the points after a really, really good drive. We're a bit of a phenomenon in Formula One these days.
Yeah, and to get, I know what you mean when you say scraping, but like it wasn't like they were in the fights with their teammates. Like, full credit to them.
Yeah, a little bit of luck, but hey, in Formula One, as we've already addressed with the likes of it goes your way and sometimes it doesn't. You need it, and it went their way, and they deserved it. Up next is Spicy Pastry.
Hey boys, Spicy Pastry here. My moment of the race was trying not to wake up my 3-month-old son while screaming at the screen for Piastri's filthy overtake. And now I'm about to listen to the Aussie anthem. Love it. Good one, boys. Like,
I love that he's still whispering.
Yeah.
As well, I love that the king is clearly still asleep. So you've succeeded. The fact you've got to this point and you've then gone, crap, I've got to do a moment of the race submission for LB. But you were rewarded with an Aussie win.
Admire the effort.
Yeah, well done, you. Maybe don't play the podcast out too loud either. Coming up next is Nick the Quick.
Hey, what's up, late breakers? This is Nick. The quick moment of the race is Red Bull changing the floor before qualifying and giving Max another terrible car. Unserious team. Can't wait till they lose to constructors. Max need to get out of there. This is ridiculous. Banger of a race, though. Congrats to Piastri. Absolutely amazing. Sainz, not sure what you were doing, but anyway, see ya.
Interesting, isn't it? Interesting. The narrative is really shifting for Verstappen at Red Bull. You know, not serious team, get him out. Aston Martin, Mercedes, maybe. It's very quick how, you know, he's won 3 in a row and he was so dominant last year. It's amazing how quickly the tides can change.
I really hope that what we saw from Perez today, we can get from him for the rest of this season. For his sake, obviously, but for the constructors' sake, that would make this a fun fight. So, remains to be seen, but I'd love to see that.
I'd just like to see Perez be competitive, please. More than one race a season, that'd be lovely. It's the Beef Baku Club, everyone. She's here.
Hello. You know, I'm actually not a very hello person in real life. I'm more of a hiya person. Feel like I've lied to you this whole time. Anyway, moment of the race. What? I bloody love Baku. It's so good. But maybe not moment of the race, but the cool down room just now of Oscar saying that Carlos and Perez have been good friends and Carlos just finished the job off. Love it. Okay, bye.
Brilliant. Thanks, Beef.
Not good friends.
Not good friends. Don't like you anymore, mate.
No.
Coming up next is our good friend, Inspector Seb.
Hey guys, Inspector Seb here. I've gone from not submitting in almost a year to submitting twice in 2 races because yes, Oscar Piastri, yes! So my moment of the race is when Oscar's race engineer came over the radio and told him to picture Andrea Stella on his shoulder like some sort of Darth Toto voice in his head. And I can just imagine hearing Mark Webber's "Not bad for a number 2 driver." Go Oscar, win that race. Amazing.
Did you see Mark Webber's gleeful face as Piastri was being interviewed at the end of the Grand Prix?
Yeah, I can't blame him either because so much of the narrative like this week and last week has been what will McLaren do about team orders? And then Piastri's just delivered a brilliant weekend where it just never even, it didn't matter. Like it never came into existence at all. And look, he's on, I think he's on 222 points now in the championship. That puts him just 13 behind Charles Leclerc. Puts him 32 behind Lando Norris.
It's close. It's very close.
Not much in it.
Final one for the day. And again, thank you to everyone that submits. We get so many and we love them all. But we've got to pick a few to make sure they fit on the show. But it is Bracket Dom to round us out.
Hey, late breakers, Bracket Dom. A lot of great options for moment of the race this week. You could have Norris chasing down Verstappen and getting fastest lap to still cut into the championship lead. Obviously, the huge crash on the final lap. But I'm going to pick one that probably no one else is talking about that's kind of peeving me. It's race control absolutely screwing over Nico Hulkenberg on the final lap, not throwing an immediate red flag and costing him P9.
I love that. Kind of peeving me from an American is fantastic.
Should it have been a red flag?
I was shocked it was only a VSC.
Yeah, I thought
absolutely
that was ridiculous.
shocked it was only a VSC. 2 cars in the wall. There's a steering wheel being thrown out. There's a driver getting out of the car on the racetrack. Baffling. I mean, we have not seen the safety car since Spain. I cannot believe that was only a VSC. They went 2 laps ago. Don't bother. Let him round. I can't believe it. Safety runs to the end. Till all the cars are in the paddock.
Yeah, I think they red flag that if it's 10 laps earlier, which should tell you that they should have red flagged this. A VSC only was a bit crazy. But yeah, regardless of what that would have actually caused for the results, I feel like that was the correct call.
I agree. Completely agree. Really shocked about it.
Right, and that's the final one. Thank you again to everyone who submitted moment of the race, and again there will be another opportunity midweek. The good news is though, Sam, if you're not quite done with this epic race, you can find out how we're rating every driver.
Power Rankings is going to be live with you on Monday evening on the Patreon only. So get down there, subscribe to it. It's great value. You don't just get Power Rankings. You get your beer breaking, your classic Grand Prix review. You get 2 extra episodes. You get birthday shout outs. Everything is ad free as well. You also as we're going to be live in Texas, get early access to tickets as well when they become available. Of course, we have sold out, but for next events that we do, and there will be some in the future, you will get early access as well. So thanks to everyone that supports us on there. It has been incredible to see the sport this year. Really, really appreciate it. Get yourself in the good score to make sure you are part of the submissions for the Singapore preview. Make sure you follow us for live streaming, Late Breaking Podcast. Follow us on social media, Late Breaking F1. And you can watch this on YouTube as well. It's been video recording, Late Breaking F1 as well over there. We love all the support. Thank you so much. Harry, I'm sure, will be back very, very soon if he remembers where he placed his microphone. And we'll be bringing you all the fun. We'll see you soon. In the meantime, I've been Samuel Sage.
And I've been Ben Hocking. And remember, keep breaking late.